The sound of scissors cutting through silk echoed across the ballroom. 300 guests watched in horror as a pregnant woman's designer gown fell away from her body, her back exposed, her dignity shattered. Her own husband standing just 15 feet away, laughing. But here is what no one expected, what the mistress holding those scissors never saw coming, what the cheating husband never planned for. The grand doors opened, and the pregnant woman's billionaire father walked in. What happened next? Let me just say this. By the end of this story, you will discover that this was not just an affair. This was a 4-year con, a calculated scheme worth millions. And the woman everyone thought was weak, she was about to become the most dangerous person in that room. Stay with me until the end, because the final twist, you will never see it coming. This is the story of Caroline Ashford, and her revenge is just getting started. The scissors made a sound like paper tearing, but it was not paper. It was silk. Hand-sewn Italian silk that had taken 4 fittings to perfect. 300 pairs of eyes watched the fabric fall away from Caroline Ashford Mercer's back like a curtain dropping on the final act of a tragedy. The Mercer Foundation Gala was supposed to be the highlight of the social season. 300 of Manhattan's elite gathered in the grand ballroom of the Mercer estate. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that soared 40 feet high. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner, their music now faltering as the musicians realized something was terribly wrong. Champagne flowed from a fountain imported from France. The flower arrangements alone had cost more than most people's annual salaries. Caroline had spent 3 hours getting ready for this night. Her emerald gown had been custom designed by a fashion house in Milan. The color matched her eyes perfectly. The cut accommodated her 7-month pregnant belly while still making her feel beautiful. She had chosen every detail with care. The diamond earrings her mother had left her, the simple gold bracelet Garrett had given her on their first anniversary, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon that had taken her stylist 90 minutes to perfect. She had wanted to look perfect, for him, for their guests, for herself. Now she stood in the center of that grand ballroom with cold air hitting her exposed spine. Her maternity bra was visible to anyone standing behind her. The beautiful emerald silk hung in ruins, a long tear running from her shoulder blade to the small of her back. She felt the metal before she understood what was happening. Cold, sharp, pressing against her skin for just a moment before the fabric gave way. The sound was almost gentle, a whisper of destruction. Carolyn turned slowly. Her hands were trembling as they reached for the ruined fabric, trying instinctively to hold it together, to preserve some shred of dignity. Sloane Whitfield stood behind her, salon scissors in her manicured hand, the kind hairdressers used, sharp enough to cut through anything. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon. Her red lipstick was precisely applied. Her black designer dress cost more than most people's monthly rent. And she was smiling, a small, satisfied smile. The smile of a cat that had finally caught the mouse it had been stalking for years. "Oops," Sloane's voice carried in the sudden silence, clear as a bell, designed to be heard by everyone in the room. "I thought I saw a loose thread." The baby kicked, hard, insistent, as if sensing danger. Carolyn's hand went instinctively to her swollen belly. Her daughter, the child she had wanted for so long, the child she had prayed for through 2 years of trying. The child who was supposed to cement her marriage, her family, her future. She turned to find her husband, Garrett Mercer, the man she had married 4 years ago in a ceremony that had made the front page of the society section. The man who had promised to love and protect her until death parted them. The man whose child grew inside her at this very moment. He was standing 15 feet away, holding a crystal glass of scotch, surrounded by business associates and society friends. He was laughing, not nervous laughter, not the horrified, uncomfortable laughter of a man watching his pregnant wife be publicly humiliated. This was genuine amusement. His shoulders shook. His perfect white teeth gleamed under the chandelier light. His eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when he found something truly funny. He was laughing at her. "Garrett," her voice came out wrong, too small, too fragile, barely audible over the murmur that was now spreading through the crowd. "Garrett, she just cut my dress." He took a sip of his drink. Casual, unhurried, as if they were discussing the weather or the quality of the canapes. Oh, come on, Carrie. His voice carried easily. He had always had a voice that carried. It was one of the things that made him so successful in business. Do not be so dramatic. Sloan was just having a little fun. Fun. He called this fun. The room remained frozen. 300 people in designer clothes holding $1,000 champagne, watching the wife of their host stand exposed and trembling. No one moved. No one spoke. No one came to help her. Carolyn's brain refused to process what was happening. 4 years of marriage. The affair she had suspected, but could never prove. The late nights he claimed were work dinners. The business trips that seemed to last longer and longer. The way he looked at his phone sometimes. The way he turned it face down whenever she entered the room. Sloan Whitfield, who Garrett swore was just a colleague, just a business partner, just a friend. Nothing more. Nothing to worry about. You are being paranoid, Carrie. Pregnancy hormones making you see things that are not there. The same Sloan who had attended their baby shower last month, who had smiled and brought gifts wrapped in pink paper, who had hugged Caroline and told her she was glowing, who had helped plan the nursery color scheme. She looked down at her hands. They would not stop shaking. Vivian Mercer, Garrett's mother, finally approached. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed. Her Chanel suit was pressed to perfection. Her posture was impeccable. As always, she moved through the crowd with the ease of a woman who had been navigating society events for 50 years. Finally, Carolyn thought, help. Someone who will help me. Caroline, dear, Vivian's voice was ice wrapped in silk. Quiet enough that only those immediately nearby could hear, but sharp enough to cut. Perhaps you should go upstairs and compose yourself. You are making quite the scene. She was making a scene. Her dress was hanging off her pregnant body. Her back was exposed to 300 strangers. Her husband was laughing at her humiliation. And she was making a scene. Carolyn opened her mouth to respond. No words came out. What could she possibly say? What defense could she offer against a mother-in-law who had never accepted her? Against a husband who found her pain amusing? Against a mistress bold enough to assault her in public? The silence stretched. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely. The champagne fountain bubbled on, oblivious. Somewhere in the back of the room, a phone camera clicked. Caroline wanted to disappear, to sink through the marble floor and never be seen again. To wake up and discover this was all a nightmare, a pregnancy dream, something that would fade with the morning light. But this was not a dream. This was her life, her reality, her public destruction. The grand doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. Harrison Ashford did not walk into rooms. He arrived, 6 feet 2 inches of silver-haired authority, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's annual salary. His presence commanded attention the way gravity commanded objects to fall, the way the sun commanded the earth to orbit. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in Singapore, closing a deal worth $2 billion, a deal that had been in negotiation for 8 months, a deal that was supposed to close tonight. But here he was, standing in the doorway of the Mercer Estate ballroom, his eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of a man who had built an empire on reading rooms and understanding power dynamics. His gaze found his daughter, the ruined dress, the tears she was fighting to contain, the trembling hands pressed against her pregnant belly, the desperate attempt to hold the fabric together, to preserve some dignity. Then his eyes moved to Garrett, still holding his scotch, still standing among his friends, still smiling, then to Sloan, still holding the scissors, still wearing that satisfied smirk. Then to Vivian, standing beside Caroline with her arms crossed, not helping, not comforting, just watching. Harrison's expression did not change. His face remained perfectly neutral. His posture remained perfectly controlled. Not a single muscle moved. That was how Caroline knew. That was how everyone in that room knew something terrible was about to happen. He crossed the ballroom floor, each step deliberate, each footfall silent on the marble despite his leather-soled shoes. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. No one dared speak. No one dared breathe too loudly. No one dared stand in his path. Harrison Ashford had destroyed companies that tried to oppose him, had ended careers with a single phone call, had made and broken fortunes with the stroke of a pen. He was not a man people crossed. He reached his daughter, Without a word, he removed his jacket, cashmere and silk, custom tailored in London, worth more than most people's cars. He draped it over Caroline's shoulders with a gentleness that contradicted the steel in his eyes. The jacket smelled like his cologne, sandalwood and cedar, the same scent he had worn since she was a little girl, the smell of safety, of protection, of home. She had not felt safe in months. Dad, her voice cracked on the single syllable. You were supposed to be in Singapore. I was. He buttoned the jacket carefully, covering her exposed back, making sure she was fully protected from prying eyes. His fingers were steady. His voice was calm, measured, the voice he used in boardrooms when the stakes were highest. I left. Something told me I needed to be here tonight. Garrett finally stopped smiling. The realization of what was happening seemed to penetrate his alcohol-glazed confidence. He set down his scotch glass on the nearest tray with a click that echoed in the silent room. Harrison. He stepped forward, hand extended for a handshake that would never come. His voice was too loud, too hearty, the voice of a man trying desperately to regain control of a situation that had slipped away from him. Good to see you. This is all just a misunderstanding. Sloan was just playing around and things got a little out of hand. Harrison did not take his hand, did not even glance at it, did not acknowledge the gesture at all. Mr. Ashford. The correction was quiet, almost gentle, but the room heard it. Every single person in that ballroom heard it. My daughter is Mrs. Mercer. You no longer have the privilege of my first name. The color drained from Garrett's face. In that moment, watching her husband realize that he had made a terrible mistake, Caroline felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not vindication, something harder, something colder. The beginning of the end. Sloan tried to slip away. She had made it halfway to the service entrance, her red-soled heels clicking against the marble, when Harrison's voice stopped her. Miss Whitfield. He did not turn around, did not raise his voice, did not need to. His words carried with the authority of a man who was never ignored. You will want to stay. There will be questions for you. She froze mid-step. Her face, so confident moments before, now showed the first flickers of fear. Vivian Mercer stepped forward. Her society smile was firmly in place. The smile that had graced the covers of Town and Country. The smile that had welcomed senators and celebrities to this very ballroom. The smile that concealed decades of manipulation and control. Harrison, really. Her voice carried the condescension of old money addressing new. The Mercer family had been wealthy for generations. The Ashford fortune was newer. Made, not inherited. In Vivian's world, that distinction mattered. Let us not blow this out of proportion. Young people make mistakes. I am sure Sloan did not mean any real harm. Caroline's dress can be replaced. There is no need for such dramatics. Harrison finally turned to face her. His expression remained neutral. His voice remained calm. But something in his eyes, something cold and hard and absolutely ruthless, made Vivian take a small step backward. Vivian, he paused. Let the silence stretch. Let everyone in the room feel the weight of what was coming. Your son is having an affair with that woman. She just physically assaulted my pregnant daughter in front of 300 witnesses. He gestured almost imperceptibly. Behind him, 3 people were holding up their phones. His people. His security detail that Caroline had not even noticed enter the room. They had been recording everything. I have 19 of them on video already. Multiple angles. Clear audio. Documented evidence of assault against a pregnant woman. His voice dropped lower, but somehow carried further. I would suggest you stop talking now. Vivian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Harrison turned to his daughter, his hand gentle on her arm, his voice soft enough that only she could hear. Come with me, sweetheart. We need to talk. Caroline let him lead her out of the ballroom. 300 pairs of eyes followed their exit. 300 phones captured every moment. 300 people would be talking about this night for years to come. But Caroline did not care about any of them. She cared only about putting one foot in front of the other. About keeping her hand on her straddle where her daughter was still kicking, harder now, as if responding to her mother's distress. About breathing in the familiar scent of her father's cologne and remembering what safety felt like. She had walked into this ballroom as Caroline Ashford Mercer, wife of one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors, pregnant with what everyone assumed was the perfect family's perfect addition. She would walk out as something else entirely. She just did not know what yet. The library smelled like leather and old money and lies. Garrett's library. Though Caroline had always thought of it as theirs, 4 years of marriage had convinced her that what was his was hers, that they were partners, that they were building a life together. She understood now how wrong she had been. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. First editions that Garrett had never read. Decorations, nothing more. Status symbols bound in leather and gold. The spines were uncracked. The pages were pristine. They had been purchased by the yard, like wallpaper, to create the appearance of intellect and culture. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one wall. Above it hung a portrait of the Mercer family, 3 generations of wealth and privilege staring down at anyone who entered. Garrett's grandfather. Garrett's father. Garrett himself, painted just after their wedding, looking distinguished and successful and utterly trustworthy. Burgundy walls surrounded her. They had seemed warm when she first saw this room. Inviting, the color of wine and romance and old-world elegance. Now they seemed oppressive. Closing in, the color of dried blood. Harrison closed the door behind them. The click of the latch sounded final, like a door closing on her old life. Carolyn sank into one of the leather chairs. Her father's jacket was still wrapped around her shoulders. The ruined dress pulled around her swollen ankles. Her hands would not stop shaking no matter how hard she pressed them together. The baby kicked again, gentler now, as if trying to comfort her. "How long have you known?" The words came out before she could stop them, before she could prepare herself for the answer. Harrison did not pretend to misunderstand. He never did. That was one of the things she loved about her father. His directness, his honesty, his refusal to hide behind comfortable lies. He sat across from her in the matching leather chair. His posture was perfect, as always. His expression was carefully controlled. But his eyes, when they met hers, held a sadness she had rarely seen. 3 months. 3 months. 90 days. Thousands of hours. Her father had known for 3 months that her husband was having an affair. 3 months of dinners at the Ashford estate where Garrett had smiled and charmed and played the devoted son-in-law. 3 months of phone calls where Harrison had asked about the baby and the nursery and Caroline's health. 3 months of Sunday brunches where they had all sat together pretending to be a happy family. He had never said a word. "Why did you not tell me?" Harrison leaned forward. His elbows rested on his knees, a posture she had seen 1,000 times in boardrooms and negotiations. Never before directed at her. This was how he sat when delivering difficult news, when explaining hard truths. "Because you were not ready to hear it." His voice was gentle but firm. "And because I needed to know everything first. The full scope, the complete picture. I needed to understand exactly what we were dealing with before I brought it to you." "What we were dealing with? You make it sound like a business problem." "In many ways it is." Harrison held up a hand before she could protest. "I do not mean to diminish what you are feeling. But Garrett approached this marriage like a business venture, a hostile acquisition. If we are going to defeat him, we need to understand that." "Defeat him?" Carolyn shook her head. "I just found out my husband is cheating on me. I am not ready to talk about defeating anyone." "You will be." Harrison reached into the inside pocket of his vest, removed a small flash drive, set it on the table between them. "Because the affair is only the beginning." Carolyn stared at the flash drive. Such a small thing. Black plastic, metal connector, no bigger than her thumb. It looked innocuous, ordinary. The kind of thing you might use to transfer vacation photos or work documents. But she knew, looking at it, that it contained the destruction of everything she had believed about her life. What is on it? Evidence, documentation, 4 years of lies compiled into one convenient package. Harrison did not look away from her eyes. "The affair started 2 months after your wedding. Sloane was not his first. She will not be his last. She is simply the most ambitious, the most calculated." Carolyn felt her stomach lurch. 2 months after the wedding, she had still been glowing from the honeymoon, still finding love notes he had hidden in her luggage, still believing that she had found her fairy tale ending. But that is not the worst part, Harrison continued. She looked up sharply. What could possibly be worse than learning my entire marriage was a lie? Learning why it was a lie. Harrison stood, walked to the window. His back was to her, but she could see his reflection in the glass. His jaw was tight, his hands were clasped behind his back. He has been siphoning money from your trust, the one your grandmother left you. $2.3 million over the past 3 years. The room tilted. The burgundy walls seemed to pulse and breathe. Carolyn gripped the arms of the chair so hard her knuckles went white. $2.3 million. Her grandmother's money. The trust that had been set aside for her since before she was born. The money that Margaret Ashford had worked her whole life to accumulate. The money that was supposed to go to Caroline's children, to this baby growing inside her. Gone. Stolen. By the man who had promised to love and protect her. I do not understand. Her voice sounded far away, disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. How could he access my trust? There were protections, safeguards. Your lawyer set them up specifically to prevent this. The quarterly disbursements. You signed authorizations 3 years ago giving him access to manage your investment portfolio. Do you remember? She did remember. It had been right after their first anniversary. Garrett had mentioned it casually over breakfast. Just some paperwork, he had said, for tax purposes. It would make things simpler if he could manage both their portfolios together. Consolidated accounting. Standard practice for married couples. She had signed without reading carefully, without having her own lawyer review the documents. Because she trusted him. Because she loved him. Because she believed that marriage meant partnership. That what was hers was his, and what was his was hers. Because she was a fool. I was such an idiot. The words came out hollow, empty, drained of everything except exhaustion. No, Harrison's voice was firm. He turned from the window, crossed to her chair, knelt in front of her the way he had when she was a child, when she had skinned her knee or lost her favorite toy or woken from a nightmare. You were trusting. There is a difference between being foolish and being deceived by someone who made deception their life's work. Is there? Because right now, they feel exactly the same. He counted on your trust. He exploited it. He weaponized your love against you. Harrison took her hands in his. They were warm and steady, an anchor in the storm. That makes him the monster, Carolyn, not you the fool. You loved honestly. You trusted openly. Those are virtues. He is the one who corrupted them. A knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison rose smoothly, his CEO demeanor slipping back into place like armor. Come in. The door opened. 2 people entered. The first was Margot Sinclair, Caroline's best friend since freshman year at Columbia, her maid of honor at the wedding, the event planner who had helped coordinate tonight's gala. She had been there through everything. The dating years, the engagement, the wedding planning, the pregnancy, every joy and every struggle. Her face was streaked with tears. Her perfectly applied makeup was ruined. Her designer dress was wrinkled where she had been clutching it in distress. The second was Theodore Ashford, Teddy, Caroline's younger brother by 3 years. He worked in the family business, learning the ropes from their father. He had his mother's eyes and his father's temperament. Stubborn, loyal, quick to anger when someone he loved was threatened. His hands were clenched into fists. His jaw was tight. He looked like he wanted to put those fists through a wall or through Garrett's face. Carrie, Margot rushed forward, dropped to her knees beside the chair, took Caroline's hands in hers. God, Carrie, I am so sorry. I should have said something. I should have told you what I saw. Caroline looked down at her friend. What did you see? 2 months ago, at the Hampton house, I stopped by to drop off fabric samples for the nursery curtains. You were supposed to be there, remember? But your doctor's appointment ran late. Carolyn remembered. The 20-week ultrasound, the one where they had confirmed the baby was a girl. She had been so excited to rush home and tell Garrett. Had called him from the car. He had not answered. I saw them, Margot's voice broke. Garrett and Sloane, through the window of the pool house. They did not see me. They were too occupied. The word hung in the air. Occupied. Such a clinical term for such a devastating reality. I told myself I was wrong, Margot continued. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that I misunderstood what I was seeing, that there was no way Garrett would do that to you. She looked up. Her eyes were swimming with guilt and tears. I was a coward, Carrie. I should have told you immediately. I should have trusted what I saw instead of what I wanted to believe. Carolyn reached down, cupped her friend's face in her hands. You were scared. You did not want to hurt me. She tried to smile. It felt wrong on her face, like a mask that did not quite fit. I understand scared. I do not deserve your understanding. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. She looked at her brother, at her father, at the people who had dropped everything to be here for her. I need all of you right now. I cannot afford to be angry at the people who love me. Harrison cleared his throat. There is more you need to know, and we do not have much time. He sat back down. His face was grave, the face of a man about to deliver a death blow. Emmeline Drake contacted me 30 minutes ago, Garrett's executive assistant. I know who she is. Caroline's voice was flat. She schedules his business dinners, books his travel, manages his calendar. She also manages his secrets. She has been complicit in the affair for years, but tonight something changed. What changed? She grew a conscience. Harrison pulled out his phone, scrolled to a recording. After everyone left the gala, Garrett and Sloane thought they were alone. They went to his study. The door was not closed all the way. Emmeline was still there. She recorded this. He pressed play. Garrett's voice filled the room, slurred slightly from alcohol, but clear enough to understand. That was perfect, baby. Did you see her face? She looked like a deer in headlights. Sloane's voice, cool, satisfied. I told you it would work. She needed to be reminded of her place. The old man showing up was not part of the plan. It does not matter. The divorce filing is ready, Monday morning, before she even knows what hit her. And the custody angle? Solid. I have been documenting her anxiety attacks for months. The therapy sessions, the mood swings. Any judge will see she is emotionally unstable, unfit to care for a child. What about her father? What about him? She signed the postnup last month. If Harrison tries to interfere, she forfeits everything, including custody. The recording ended. The room was silent. Carolyn felt like she had been punched in the stomach. The air would not come. Her lungs would not work. The world had narrowed to a single point of white-hot pain. He was going to take her baby. He was going to file for divorce, claim she was unstable, use her own struggles against her. Take her daughter and give her to Sloane, and she had signed away her rights, except, I did not sign it. The words came out as a whisper. Everyone looked at her. The post-nuptial agreement. Garrett kept asking me to sign it, said it was for estate planning, but something kept stopping me. I meant to sign it. I picked up the pen 3 times, but I never did. Harrison's expression shifted, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You are certain? I am certain. I kept putting it off. Pregnancy brain, I told myself. I would do it next week. Next week never came. Teddy let out a breath. Thank God. That changes everything. Harrison was already pulling out his phone. Without that agreement, he has no leverage, no way to block our interference, and no special claim to custody. What do we do now? Carolyn asked. Harrison looked at her. His eyes were hard, determined. The eyes of a man who had built an empire from nothing and would burn it all down to protect his daughter. Now we file first, tonight, before he even wakes up tomorrow morning. Is that possible? It is Saturday night. I have people, Caroline. I always have people. He was already dialing. Pack what you need, only the essentials. Everything else can be replaced. We leave in 20 minutes. Where are we going? Harrison paused at the door, looked back at his daughter, at her ruined dress and her tear-stained face and the protective hand pressed against her belly. Home, he said simply. You are coming home, sweetheart, where you should have been all along. The memories came unbidden. Carolyn sat in the back of her father's town car as it wound through Manhattan's empty streets. The city was quiet at this hour, past midnight. The theaters had closed. The restaurants had emptied. Only the dedicated partygoers and the lonely insomniacs remained. Margot sat beside her, silent, supportive, her hand resting on Caroline's arm in a gesture of comfort that required no words. Harrison was into the front seat, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent, making calls to lawyers and judges and people whose names Caroline did not recognize, pulling strings, calling in favors, preparing for war. Teddy followed in a separate car with their belongings, the few things Carolyn had grabbed from the Mercer estate, a change of clothes, her laptop, the baby book she had been reading, the journal she had started for her daughter. She had left everything else behind, the designer wardrobe, the jewelry, the 4 years of accumulated possessions that had seemed so important just hours ago. None of it mattered now. None of it had ever really been hers. And the memories came. Their first meeting, the Ashford Foundation benefit 4 years ago. She had been standing by the champagne table, bored out of her mind by another society function she had been obligated to attend. Her father's world, not hers. She had always preferred quieter gatherings, book clubs, small dinner parties, museums on rainy afternoons. But duty called. The Ashford name came with responsibilities. He had appeared out of nowhere, tall, handsome, confident in the way of men who had never been denied anything they wanted. He had knocked into her, spilled champagne on her dress, red on white, a stain that had never fully come out. God, I am so sorry. His voice had been warm, charming, genuinely apologetic. I am usually not this clumsy. Something about you must have thrown off my equilibrium. She had laughed. The line was cheesy, obvious, but his delivery had been perfect, self-deprecating, playful. He had offered to pay for the cleaning. She had said it was unnecessary. He had insisted on getting her a new glass of champagne. She had relented. They had talked for 2 hours. He knew about art, about literature, about the nonprofit work that mattered to her. He had asked questions about her foundation initiatives, listened to her answers, remembered the details. She had thought it was fate, serendipity, the universe finally delivering the partner she had been waiting for. What she had thought was a chance encounter was actually a calculated approach. Every word had been rehearsed, every gesture had been planned. He had researched her before the event, learned her interests, her vulnerabilities, her desires. She had been a target before she was a name. The proposal in Paris, the Eiffel Tower at sunset. He had gotten down on one knee in front of a crowd of tourists who had stopped to watch and applaud. The ring had been her grandmother's setting with a new center stone, a perfect blend of family tradition and fresh beginnings. I cannot imagine my life without you, he had said. His eyes had been wet with tears that looked genuine. His hands had been trembling. Please say you will be mine, forever. She had cried. Happy tears, she thought. The happiest moment of her life, she thought. She had said yes. The crowd had cheered. He had spun her around. They had kissed while the city of lights sparkled below them. They were not happy tears. Not really. Some part of her had known even then. Some instinct she had silenced because she wanted so badly to believe. Their wedding day, the white dress her mother had helped her choose just months before she passed. The flowers arranged in the exact style her mother had described in her wedding planning journals from 30 years ago. 400 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, coverage in every major society publication. Her father walking her down the aisle, his eyes wet, his grip on her arm tight. Had he known something even then? Had he suspected? Garrett's vows. His voice had cracked when he promised to protect her, to cherish her, to love her until death parted them. Everyone had cried. What a beautiful couple, they had said. What a perfect match, a millionaire and a billionaire's daughter, a fairy tale come to life. Fairy tales, Carolyn now understood, were just lies dressed in white. She had been sleeping next to a stranger for 4 years, sharing her bed, sharing her body, sharing her most intimate thoughts and fears and dreams. And he had been laughing at her the whole time. Carrie, Margot's voice pulled her back to the present. We are here. The car had stopped in front of the Ashford estate, the house where Caroline had grown up. Red brick and white columns, manicured lawns and ancient oak trees, a home that had seen generations of Ashfords live and love and grow. She had left this house at 18, certain she was ready to build her own life, certain she did not need her father's protection or her family's name, certain she could make her own way in the world. She had not been back to stay since her wedding. The front door opened before she could reach it. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway, the housekeeper who had been with the family for 30 years. White hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes behind practical glasses. The same woman who had made Caroline chicken soup when she was sick, who had let her sneak cookies before dinner, who had held her when her mother died. Miss Caroline, Mrs. Patterson's voice was warm, welcoming. She stepped forward and pulled Caroline into a gentle hug, careful of the pregnant belly between them. Your room is ready, fresh sheets, fresh flowers, just the way you like it. Miss Carolyn, not Mrs. Mercer. Already they were erasing him from her identity, reclaiming her. Her childhood bedroom was exactly as she remembered. Pale blue walls she had chosen when she was 12. White furniture that had seemed so sophisticated when she was a teenager. The window seat where she had spent countless hours reading. The view of her mother's rose garden. But tonight, the familiar surroundings offered no comfort. Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her father's jacket over the ruined gown. Her feet ached. Her back ached. Her heart ached most of all. Harrison appeared in the doorway. He held a folder. Thick, manila. The kind that contained things you did not want to know. There is more, he said. Of course there was. There was always more. He sat beside her on the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. She remembered being a child, him sitting just like this when she had nightmares, when she was scared of storms, when the world seemed too big and too frightening. She wished a hug could fix this like it fixed those childhood fears. Harrison opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, corporate documents, a timeline that stretched back 4 years, before the wedding, before the engagement, before that supposedly chance encounter at the benefit. Garrett approached Sloan before he approached you. Harrison's voice was gentle, but the words cut like glass. She is not just his mistress, Carolyn. She is his business partner. They have been planning this together since before your engagement. Caroline's vision tunneled. The photographs blurred. She could not breathe. Planning what? Everything. Harrison spread the documents across the bed. Emails, text messages, meeting notes. A systematic campaign documented in damning detail. The courtship, the proposal, the pregnancy. He targeted you specifically for your trust fund and your connection to Ashford Industries. Sloan was supposed to be patient, wait until he had extracted enough money. Then a quiet divorce, irreconcilable differences, nothing scandalous. She would step in after a suitable mourning period. They would share everything he had stolen. But the baby, Carolyn's hand went to her belly. Her daughter kicked, as if responding to the mention of her existence. The baby was not supposed to happen. No, well, Harrison's eyes were sad. The baby was not in their plan. You're getting pregnant complicated things. Changed the timeline. Made the extraction more difficult. He paused, seemed to struggle with what came next. Sloan got impatient, jealous. That is why she snapped tonight. You were supposed to be temporary, Caroline. A stepping stone, a bank account with legs. You were never supposed to give him an heir. Never supposed to create a permanent connection. The room tilted. The walls closed in. The blue paint seemed to pulse and breathe. Everything. Her entire marriage. From the moment she met him to this very night, every kiss, every whisper, every time he said, I love you, and she believed him. All of it was a con, a carefully orchestrated scheme to steal her money and her dignity and her future. She had been a target before she was a wife, a mark before she was a mother. I need a minute. Her voice did not sound like her own. Please, I just need a minute alone, Faye. Harrison nodded, squeezed her shoulder, left the folder on the bed. Caroline sat in silence. The documents spread around her. The evidence of her husband's betrayal laid out in black and white. She thought about all the signs she had missed. The late nights he claimed were work. The conference that required overnight stays. The phone calls he took in the other room. The way he always knew exactly what to say to make her doubts feel foolish. The small voice inside her that had whispered something is wrong. You know something is wrong. This is not what love is supposed to feel like. The voice she had silenced again and again because she wanted to believe, because the alternative was too painful, because admitting the truth meant admitting she had wasted 4 years of her life on a lie. I knew. She spoke the words aloud, to herself, to her daughter, or to the empty room. Part of me knew all along. It was not a question, it was a statement, a truth she had been running from for years. She had known. Deep down in that quiet place where intuition lives, she had known something was wrong. She had ignored it because facing it was too hard, because she wanted the fairy tale, because she was afraid of being alone. But she was alone anyway. She had been alone in her marriage for years, alone with a man who saw her as a commodity, a resource to be exploited. At least now she knew the truth. She stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, the rose garden was dark. Her mother's roses. The ones Eleanor Ashford had planted 30 years ago. The ones that still bloomed every summer, despite neglect and storms and harsh winters. Her mother had died 8 years ago. Cancer, quick and brutal. Carolyn had held her hand at the end, had promised to make her proud, to live a good life, to find happiness. I am sorry, Mom, she whispered to the glass, to her reflection, to whatever remained of her mother in this house. I am sorry I let him fool me. I am sorry I did not listen to my gut. I am sorry I wasted so much time. But even as she apologized, something else stirred inside her, something harder, something fiercer, something that had been dormant for years, buried under layers of politeness and accommodation. Anger. Not at herself for being deceived, not anymore. That anger would come later, she knew, would need to be processed and released. This anger was different. This anger was directed outward, at Garrett for his calculated cruelty, at Sloane for her vicious satisfaction, at everyone who had known and said nothing. The anger felt good, clean, like fire burning away dead wood, like a fever breaking. She turned from the window, looked at the folder on the bed, all that evidence, all those lies documented in black and white. Garrett thought he had won. He thought she would crumble under the weight of his betrayal, fall apart, make it easy for him to take everything. He did not know her at all. He had married a mask, a performance. The version of Caroline that smiled and nodded and never questioned. The version that trusted too easily and forgave too quickly. The version that had been trained since childhood to be pleasant and accommodating and never make waves. That version was dead now. Killed on the ballroom floor of the Mercer estate. What rose in its place was something new. Something forged in humiliation and betrayal and the cold light of truth. Something dangerous. Caroline picked up the folder, settled back against the headboard, began to read every document, study every photograph, absorb every damning piece of evidence. By the time the sun rose, she would know everything. And then she would begin to plan. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Caroline was still awake, still reading, still cataloging every lie and manipulation. Her eyes burned from hours of focusing on small print. Her back ached from sitting in the same position too long. The baby had finally settled, perhaps sensing her mother needed quiet to concentrate. But Caroline could not stop, would not stop. Every document revealed new depths to Garrett's deception. Every email showed how carefully he had planned her destruction. Every piece of evidence added fuel to the fire burning in her chest. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost ignored it, almost let it go to voicemail. No one she wanted to talk to would call from an unknown number at 2 in the morning. But something made her answer, intuition, curiosity, the same instinct that had made her leave the post-nuptial agreement unsigned. Hello? Mrs. Mercer? A woman's voice, familiar somehow, nervous. Please do not hang up. This is Emmeline Drake. I need to tell you something important. Emmeline Drake, Garrett's executive assistant for 7 years. The woman who scheduled his business dinners, who booked his hotels, who kept his calendar meticulously organized, who had smiled at Caroline at company events while helping her husband conduct his affair. Why should I listen to anything you have to say? Caroline's voice was ice, cold and sharp and unforgiving. You helped him. You knew what he was doing. You made reservations and booked flights and kept his secrets. I know. Emmeline's voice shook. And I hate myself for it. I have hated myself for years. But I did not know everything. Not until tonight. What changed tonight? After everyone left the gala, Garrett and Sloane thought they were alone. They went to his study to celebrate. The door was not closed all the way. I was still there, finishing the cleanup coordination with the catering staff. I heard them talking. Caroline's grip tightened on the phone. My father played me a recording. There is more. Things that recording did not capture. Emmeline took a shaky breath. After your father played what he had, I went back. Listened longer. They talked for almost an hour, planning, strategizing, making sure their story was straight. Tell me. They were talking about the baby. Your baby. Emmeline paused. Her breathing was ragged. Sloane said the original plan was supposed to be done by now. You were supposed to have signed the post-nuptial agreement last month. Without it, she said, things get complicated. The post-nuptial agreement. Caroline's blood ran cold, remembering how close she had come to signing it, how many times she had picked up the pen, how Garrett had kept bringing it up, casually, persistently. What was in that agreement? Everything, Emmeline's voice dropped. I pulled the file after they left. I have administrative access to all his legal documents. Full custody to Garrett in case of divorce. Complete waiver of your trust protections. A clause that forfeits your parental rights if your father interferes in Garrett's business affairs. And something else, something about your mother. Carolyn sat up straight. My mother? I do not understand all of it, but there was a provision about certain letters, old correspondence, something that would become public if you or your father tried to contest the terms. Letters, old correspondence, about her mother. What letters? What are you talking about? I do not know the details, but Sloane was very confident. She said even if you did not sign the agreement, she had insurance. Things that would destroy your family's reputation if they ever came to light. A chill ran down Caroline's spine. Her mother had been gone for 8 years. What secrets could she possibly have left behind? Why are you telling me this, Caroline asked. After everything you helped him do, why come to me now? Emmeline was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was raw with emotion. I have a daughter. She is 12. Her name is Sophie. She is smart and trusting, and she sees the best in everyone, just like I used to. Another pause. Someday she might fall in love with someone like Garrett Mercer, someone charming and handsome and completely hollow inside, someone who knows exactly what to say to make her doubt herself. Carolyn closed her eyes. She knew that feeling intimately. If that ever happens to Sophie, Emmeline continued, I hope someone is brave enough to warn her. The way I should have warned you years ago. The way I was too cowardly to do until it was almost too late. You could lose everything by telling me this. Your your reputation. Garrett could come after you. I know, but I cannot live with myself anymore. I cannot look at my daughter and pretend to be a good person while helping bad people do bad things. Emmeline's voice strengthened. I have copies of everything, emails, documents, recordings. I am prepared to testify if it comes to that. Why should I trust you? You should not. You have no reason to trust anyone right now. Emmeline took a breath. But I can prove what I am saying. I am going to send you a file. Everything I have. You can verify it independently. Have your father's lawyers review it. If I am lying, you will know. And if you are telling the truth, then you will have the ammunition you need to destroy him. A pause. The way he was planning to destroy you. The line went dead. Carolyn sat motionless, the phone still pressed to her ear. Then she stood, walked to her father's study, knocked on the door even though she knew he would be awake. Come in. Harrison was behind his desk, laptop open, phone within reach, papers spread across the surface. He looked like he had not slept, because he had not. Neither had she. I just got a call, Caroline said, from Emmeline Drake. She told him everything, the conversation, the warnings, the promise of documents, the mention of her mother. As she spoke, Harrison's face went gray. She had never seen her father look old before. He had always seemed ageless to her, invincible, a force of nature rather than a mortal man. He looked old now, tired, burdened by secrets she did not yet understand. Dad, she sat in the chair across from his desk. What letters? What is Sloan talking about? Harrison stood, walked to the window. His back was to her. His reflection in the glass showed a man at war with himself. Your mother was engaged before me. His voice was quiet, heavy, to a man named Charles Whitfield. The name hit her like a physical blow. Sloane's father? Yes. Harrison did not turn around. Charles was old money, the kind of family that traced their lineage to the Mayflower and never let anyone forget it. They had a summer house in Newport and a seat at the Metropolitan Opera and opinions about everyone who was not exactly like them. How did Mom meet him? At a debutante ball. Your mother was 19, beautiful, naive, impressed by wealth and status because she had never had either. Harrison's voice was sad, distant, lost in memories. Charles was 32, sophisticated, charming in the way of men who have never been told no. They were engaged within 3 months. What happened? Me. Harrison finally turned. His expression was sad. I was nobody then, working my way up from the bottom, selling insurance, taking night classes, dreaming of something bigger. Your mother's father hired me to review his policies. I met Eleanor in his living room. She was reading by the window. I forgot every word I had prepared to say. Carolyn tried to imagine it. Her father young and hungry, her mother beautiful and engaged to someone else. The impossible odds of their meeting. She chose you. Not immediately, not easily. Harrison sat back down. We talked for months before anything happened. She was engaged. I respected that. But the more we talked, the more she realized that Charles was not the man she thought he was. He was controlling, jealous, possessive in ways that frightened her. Did he threaten her? He tried. When she ended the engagement, he told her he would destroy her reputation, spread rumors about her, make sure no one in society would receive her. Harrison's jaw tightened. I spent the first 10 years of our marriage building enough power to make sure he could never hurt us. By the time I succeeded, Charles had drunk himself into irrelevance. But he told Sloan about Mom. He poisoned her with his bitterness, raised her on stories of the woman who ruined his life, the woman who chose a nobody over him. He made your mother into the villain of his story. Harrison paused, and he kept the letters. What letters? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. His hands were clasped on the desk. His knuckles were white. Your mother was lonely early in our marriage. I was working constantly, building the company, never home. She felt invisible, forgotten. He looked up, met her eyes. There was a brief period, maybe 6 months, when she wrote to Charles. Nothing happened. They never saw each other. But the letters were intimate, confessional. She told him she missed him, that she wondered sometimes if she had made the right choice. Carolyn felt the ground shift beneath her. Her mother, the woman she had idolized, the pillar of grace and integrity. She had an emotional affair? No, she had doubts. She was human. Harrison's voice was firm, defensive. She wrote letters during a difficult time. She never mailed most of them, but Charles kept the ones she did send. She never acted on any of it. She chose me, Carolyn. Every single day, she chose me so. Those letters were a moment of weakness, not a pattern of behavior. But if Sloan releases them, it would hurt us, damage your mother's reputation, tarnish the foundation she built. Harrison's expression hardened. That is why Charles kept them all these years. And that is why he left them to Sloan. Insurance. Revenge from beyond the grave. Carolyn processed this. Her mother, her father, Charles Whitfield, Sloan. A web of history and bitterness stretching back decades before she was born. She had married into a generational war without even knowing it. We need to neutralize those letters, she said. We need something better. Harrison pulled out his phone. We need your mother's side of the story. What do you mean? Eleanor kept journals, detailed journals. For every letter she wrote to Charles, there are pages explaining why, what she was feeling, how she processed those feelings, what she ultimately chose. Harrison paused. The journals are in her study. I have never touched them, never felt I had the right. But they could help. They could tell the complete story, Not just the doubts, but the resolution. Not just the weakness, but the strength. He stood. Your mother was not a saint, Carolyn. She was a woman who struggled and questioned and ultimately chose love. The letters without the journals did tell only half that story. And Sloan only has the letters. Exactly. Carolyn stood. I need to read those journals. Are you sure? Some truths are difficult to face. I have faced nothing but difficult truths tonight. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Looked back at her father. Mom chose you. That is what matters. She chose you and she stayed and she built this life with you. The doubts were just doubts. The choice was the choice. One. Harrison's eyes glistened. When did you become so wise? Tonight. She managed a small smile. Tonight I became a lot of things. By sunrise, Carolyn had filed for divorce in a different county with a different judge, before Garrett's alarm clock even went off. By noon, she had frozen 3 accounts and initiated forensic audits of 6 more. The paper trail Garrett had tried to hide was unraveling thread by thread. By dinner, she had ensured that Garrett Mercer would never underestimate her again. The war room assembled in Harrison's library, a mahogany table that had seen decades of negotiations and deals spread with documents and laptops and the detritus of legal warfare. Carolyn sat at the head of the table, Margot on her right, Teddy on her left, Harrison at the far end, commanding the room even when silent. Leonard Cross, her father's attorney for 20 years, sat across from her, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He had won cases worth billions, had brought down corporations and protected fortunes, had never lost when it mattered. Here is where we stand. Leonard's voice was precise, measured, the voice of a man who dealt in facts, not emotions. We have evidence of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty. The recordings Emmeline provided are admissible. The financial trail is documented in excruciating detail. What about custody? Carolyn asked. Her hands rested on her belly. The baby was active today, kicking and rolling, responding perhaps to her mother's adrenaline. We filed first. That gives us jurisdiction. The judge assigned is Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, a family court judge with 30 years on the bench. She has a reputation for seeing through manipulation and protecting children's interests above all else. Garrett will fight. Let him. Leonard almost smiled. He has no leverage. The post-nuptial agreement he was counting on was never signed. The documentation of Caroline's supposed instability was clearly manufactured. His own assistant is prepared to testify against him. Teddy cracked his knuckles. What about Sloan? Multiple charges are possible. Assault with conspiracy to commit fraud. Wire fraud, theft by deception. Leonard shuffled papers. Her attorney called this morning, seeking a meeting to discuss options. Already? Margot raised her eyebrows. That was fast. She knows she is exposed. The emails Harrison obtained, the recordings, the financial documents. She was smart enough to realize the ship is sinking. What is she offering? Caroline asked. Full cooperation, testimony against Garrett, documentation of their planning and communication, in exchange for reduced charges and no prison time. Carolyn considered this. Sloane's face in the ballroom, the scissors in her hand, the smile as she cut through silk and dignity. No deal, not yet. Caroline's voice was firm. I want her to understand exactly how much trouble she is in before we discuss any accommodation. Leonard nodded. That can be arranged. Harrison spoke for the first time. What about the letters, the leverage she claims to have? We address that separately. Leonard pulled out a different folder. Caroline has been reading her mother's journals. We can construct a narrative that contextualizes those letters within Eleanor's complete emotional journey. Doubt followed by recommitment. Question followed by answer. It becomes a story of a woman who faced temptation and chose love. Will that be enough? Sloan can release those letters anytime she wants. But if we release the journal simultaneously, the story changes. It is no longer a scandal. It is a love story. Your mother was human, struggled with doubt, and chose your father anyway. Leonard looked at Caroline. The question is whether you are willing to make that story public. Caroline had thought about little else for the past hours. Her mother's private thoughts, her struggles, her moments of weakness. Eleanor Ashford had been a pillar of society, A philanthropist, a devoted wife and mother. Her reputation was spotless. Her legacy was the foundation she had built and the lives she had touched. Did Caroline have the right to expose her humanity? To show the world that even saints had doubts? Mom would want me to survive. The words came slowly. She would want me to protect her granddaughter. If releasing those journals is what it takes, she would understand. Harrison's expression was complicated. Pride and grief and love all tangled together. Your mother loved you more than her reputation, he said. She would burn down her own legacy to keep you safe. Then that is what we do. Carolyn straightened in her chair. We prepare a preemptive release, the letters and the journals together, the complete story. We take away Sloane's leverage by making it public on our own terms. Leonard made notes. I will have the communications team draft a strategy. We can frame it as a story of authentic love, very on brand for the current moment. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Patterson entered with a silver tray. Tea and sandwiches, and the concerned expression of someone who knew her charges were not eating enough. Mr. Mercer is at the gate, she said. Security is holding him. He is quite insistent. Carolyn smiled. Her first genuine smile in what felt like years. Let him wait. She turned back to the table, back to the documents, back to the careful dismantling of the man who had tried to destroy her. Leonard, walk me through the prenuptial agreement again. Gladly. He pulled out a thick document, its pages marked with colored tabs. This was drafted before your wedding by our legal team. Garrett's attorneys tried to negotiate changes. Your father refused. What does it say about infidelity? Leonard's smile widened, the smile of a shark who has spotted blood in the water. Full recovery clause. In the event of proven infidelity, the unfaithful spouse is not only entitled to nothing, but is liable for the return of any marital assets they misappropriated. Additionally, any children of the marriage remain in the primary custody of the wrong party unless that party is deemed unfit by an independent psychiatric evaluation conducted by a court-appointed professional. Independent evaluation. Carolyn nodded. Not Garrett's hired doctors. Exactly. And there is more. The prenup includes a liquidated damages provision for breach of marital fidelity. $1 million per proven instance of infidelity. Teddy let out a low whistle. How many instances do we have documented? At minimum, 17, over 3 years. Leonard was practically glowing. That is $17 million in damages, plus the $2.3 million he stole from the trust, plus interest, plus legal fees. His net worth is what? Margot asked. Approximately $11 million. After satisfying the prenup obligations and the theft recovery, he will be left with perhaps $1 million, maybe less, depending on how the criminal charges proceed. Carolyn sat back, let the information wash over her. 3 days ago, she had been decorating a nursery, choosing between yellow and green for the curtains, debating names with a husband who had pretended to care, planning a future that had never existed. Now she was orchestrating that man's complete financial destruction. She should feel something. Guilt, perhaps, or satisfaction, or grief for the life she had thought she was building. Instead, she felt empty, hollowed out, like the shell of a person going through the motions while something fundamental rebuilt itself inside. The anger was still there, banked like coals waiting for fuel. But the overwhelming emotion right now was exhaustion and determination, and a fierce protective love for the daughter who would never know the man who had helped create her. What do you want to do about Garrett? Leonard asked. He is still at the gate. Carolyn considered. She could make him wait for hours, days. Let him stew in uncertainty while she consolidated her position. But there was value in confrontation, in looking him in the eye and showing him exactly who she had become. Let him in. She stood, smoother clothes. She was not wearing a designer gown today, just simple black pants and a cream sweater. No makeup, no jewelry, no armor except her own resolve. I think it is time my husband and I had a conversation. Garrett looked smaller somehow. The transformation was startling. Just 48 hours ago, he had stood in the ballroom of his estate, laughing at his pregnant wife's humiliation. Confident, cruel, untouchable. Now he stood in the foyer of the Ashford estate, flanked by security guards who had confiscated his phone and his dignity at the gate. His tailored suit was wrinkled. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he had not slept. Good, Carolyn thought. Neither had she. She descended the stairs slowly, her hand on the railing for balance, her other hand on her belly, where her daughter was surprisingly still, as if she too wanted to hear what her father had to say. Carolyn had chosen her appearance deliberately. No glamour, no pretense, just a pregnant woman in comfortable clothes, facing the man who had betrayed her. She wanted him to see her clearly, to understand that the woman he had manipulated was gone. Carrie, Garrett's voice cracked on her name. He stepped forward. The security guards tensed. Thank God, we need to talk. This has all gotten completely out of hand. Has it? This divorce filing, it came out of nowhere. In the frozen accounts, I cannot access anything. My lawyers say there is some kind of investigation. The police want to question me about financial irregularities. He was talking fast, panicking, the mask slipping. This is insane. We can work this out. We do not need lawyers and judges and all this drama. Do we not? This is not you. He tried to step closer. The guards blocked him. This is your father. He has always hated me, always thought I was not good enough for you. He is manipulating you, using this misunderstanding to turn you against me. Misunderstanding. Carolyn tasted the word. Let its absurdity roll around her tongue. Is that what you are calling it? Sloane made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I know that. She was drunk, she was not thinking clearly. And yes, okay, we had a thing. He ran his hands through his hair. The gesture that used to seem endearing now looked desperate. A brief thing, it is over now, I ended it. I swear to you, Carrie, it meant nothing. You ended it. Months ago, I realized what I was risking, what I could lose. His eyes were wet, tears or technique she could no longer tell. You are my wife. You are the mother of my child. I love you. He reached for her hand. She stepped back. Do not touch me. Carrie, please. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But we have 4 years together. We have a baby coming. We cannot just throw that away because I made one mistake. One mistake. Carolyn shook her head slowly. Do you know what I have been doing for the past 48 hours, Garrett? I have been reading documents, thousands of pages of documents, bank records, email chains, text messages. The color drained from his face. I know about the money, $2.3 million from my grandmother's trust, funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. I can explain that. It was just temporary. Business investments that did not pan out. I was going to pay it back. I know about the post-nuptial agreement, the one you tried to trick me into signing, the one that would have given you custody of our daughter and immunity from my father's interference. That was just estate planning, standard legal. I know about the emails. Carolyn's voice was steady, almost conversational. The voice of a woman who had processed her grief and emerged on the other side. The ones where you and Sloane planned everything, where you targeted me specifically, where you calculated exactly how to approach me and win my trust. Garrett's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No denial came. I was a mark, Carolyn continued, a target, a bank account with a heartbeat. You never loved me, Garrett. You loved what I represented, what I could give you, access and money and respectability. That is not, I have the emails, I have the recordings, I have testimony from your own assistant. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is my favorite. Let me read it to you. Quote, the Ashford daughter is the target. She is naive enough to fall for the romantic approach. Get her pregnant within 2 years, and the trust fund is yours. Then we implement the exit strategy. End quote. She watched his face as she read. Watched the calculations happening behind his eyes. The realization that his careful plans had completely collapsed. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Carolyn refolded the paper, placed it back in her pocket. The point is, I know everything now. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment you looked me in the eye and promised to love me while planning to destroy me. Carrie, and there is nothing you can say that will change what happens next. Garrett's expression shifted. The wounded husband act crumbled like wet paper. Something harder emerged beneath it, something cold and calculating. The real Garrett, perhaps, the one she had been married to all along without knowing it. You think you have won. His voice was different now, flat, dangerous. You think because your father has money, because his lawyers filed some papers, that this is over? I think you have very few cards left to play. Sloan has insurance, things that would destroy your precious family legacy. His smile was cruel, twisted. Your mother was not the saint everyone thinks she was. We have letters, proof that Eleanor Ashford was planning to leave your father, to run off with another man. How do you think society will react to that? How do you think it will affect your family's precious foundation? I know about the letters. He blinked. The cruelty flickered. You know, my mother was engaged to Charles Whitfield before she met my father. She had doubts after they married. She wrote letters during a difficult time. Carolyn shrugged. She was human. She struggled. What matters is what she chose. Those letters prove she was a fraud, that your whole family's image is a lie. No, they prove she was a person, complex, uncertain, like everyone else. Carolyn reached into her other pocket, pulled out a small leather journal. This is one of my mother's journals, one of dozens. Do you want to know what she wrote on the same day she sent one of those letters to Charles? Garrett said nothing, but his eyes were fixed on the journal. I will tell you anyway. Carolyn opened to a marked page. May 4th, 1991. I wrote to Charles again today. I know I should not, but I am so lonely. Harrison works constantly. I barely see him. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake. She turned the page. But then I look at my daughter, Caroline. She smiled at me today, a real smile, and I knew I did not make a mistake. I made the only choice I could live with. Charles represents the past, a version of me that no longer exists. Harrison represents the future, the only future I want. She closed the journal. The letters without the journals tell half a story. The doubts without the resolution. The question without the answer. Caroline looked at her husband steadily. My mother was not perfect. Neither am I. But unlike you, she faced her doubts honestly. She wrote about them, processed them, and then she chose her family. Every single time she chose love. Sloan will release those letters. Let her. I will release the journals at the same time. The world will see that my mother was human, that she struggled and questioned and ultimately devoted herself to her husband and daughter. Carolyn walked toward the door. You are trying to blackmail me with my mother's humanity. It will not work. This is not over. Yes, she paused on the threshold, looked back at him. It is. Sign the divorce papers, Garrett. Do not make me destroy you completely. I do not want to, but I will if I have to. He stared at her. This woman he had married and manipulated and underestimated for 4 years. This woman who was supposed to be naive and trusting and easy to control. I do not know who you are, he said finally. Neither did I. Carolyn almost smiled. But I am figuring it out. She nodded to the security guards. Escort Mr. Mercy off the property. If he returns without an appointment, have him arrested for trespassing. And she walked away without looking back. Behind her, she heard Garrett's protests, his threats, his promises and pleas, and everything in between. The guards were unmoved. The door closed with a solid click. Carolyn walked to her mother's study, the room Eleanor had used for 30 years. The desk where she had written letters and planned charity events and built a legacy of kindness and grace. She sat in her mother's chair, opened the journal again, read the words that had guided her through the darkest night of her life. Her mother had faced temptation, had questioned her choices, had wondered about the path not taken, and then she had chosen, deliberately, consciously, every single day. That was what love really meant. Not the absence of doubt, but the presence of choice. Not perfection, but commitment. Not fairy tales, but real life, with all its complications and difficulties and moments of uncertainty. Carolyn put her hand on her belly. Her daughter kicked. I choose you, she whispered. I will always choose you. Outside the window, the roses swayed in the autumn wind. Her mother's roses, still blooming despite everything. Some things, Carolyn was learning, were stronger than they appeared. The deposition was scheduled for 9 in the morning. Carolyn had not slept well. Her daughter had been restless all night, kicking and rolling as if preparing for battle herself. By the time dawn broke over the city, Carolyn had given up on sleep entirely and was sitting by the window watching the sunrise paint the skyline gold and pink. She dressed carefully. Navy blue dress, conservative cut, low heels that would not make her feet swell, simple pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. No flashy jewelry, no statement pieces. She wanted to look serious, stable, like someone who could be trusted, like a mother. The conference room at Leonard Cross's law firm occupied the entire 42nd floor of a midtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park to the north and the steel and glass canyons of Manhattan to the south. On a clear day, you could see all the way to New Jersey. Today was a clear day. The November sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the room and illuminating every corner. Sloane Whitfield sat on one side of the long mahogany table. Red dress as always. Perfect makeup. But her confidence had cracked. Carolyn could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers kept reaching for her phone before remembering it had been confiscated at the door. Sloane's attorney sat beside her, a nervous man in an expensive suit who kept shuffling papers and glancing at his client as if hoping she might suddenly become a different person. On Caroline's side of the table, Leonard Cross, unflappable as always. Two associate attorneys loaded with documentation. A forensic accountant who had spent the past week tracing every dollar Garrett and Sloane had moved. And Caroline herself, hands folded on the table, watching, waiting. "Let us begin," Leonard said. His voice was pleasant, almost friendly, the voice of a man who knew he had already won and was simply going through the formalities. "Miss Whitfield, thank you for agreeing to this deposition." "I did not have much choice." Sloane's voice was sharp, defensive. "No, you did not." Leonard slid a document across the table. "Can you identify this for the record?" Sloane glanced at her attorney, who nodded reluctantly. She looked at the paper. "It appears to be an email. An email you sent to Garrett Mercer 4 years ago, before he met my client, before the supposed chance encounter at the Ashford Foundation benefit." Leonard paused for effect. "Shall I read the relevant passage aloud?" "I can read it myself." "Please do, for the record." Sloane's jaw tightened, but she read. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "The Ashford daughter is the target. She is naive enough to fall for the romantic approach. Get her pregnant within 2 years, and the trust fund is yours. Then we implement the exit strategy. I have already identified 3 potential ways to access her accounts. We just need time and patience." Silence filled the room. Caroline watched Sloane's face, watched the mask she wore, thinner now but still present, wondering what went through a person's mind when confronted with the evidence of their own cruelty. "That email was sent from your work computer," Leonard continued, "time-stamped and IP verified. We have independent forensic analysis confirming its authenticity." He pulled out another document. "And we have 16 more just like it. Would you like to go through them one by one?" The deposition stretched into its 2nd hour, then its 3rd. Leonard was methodical, patient. He built his case brick by brick, document by document. Bank transfers that traced the stolen money through shell companies. Hotel receipts from trysts that Sloane had thought were secret. Text messages discussing how to handle Caroline once the baby was born. Each piece of evidence stripped away another layer of Sloane's composure. But the killing blow came from someone unexpected. The conference room door opened. Emmeline Drake walked in. She wore a simple navy suit. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her expression was calm, but Caroline noticed her hands were trembling slightly at her sides. "I apologize for the interruption," Emmeline said. Her voice was steady despite the trembling. "But I believe I have testimony relevant to these proceedings." Sloane went pale. "You cannot do this. You work for Garrett. You signed a confidentiality agreement." "I resigned this morning." Emmeline took a seat at the table. "And my confidentiality agreement does not cover criminal activity." She placed a hard drive on the table. "This contains 3 years of communications between Garrett Mercer and Sloane Whitfield. calendar entries showing their meetings, financial records documenting the money transfers, and recordings. Recordings? Leonard leaned forward with interest. Garrett had a habit of leaving his phone in his office during certain activities. He did not know I had remote access to his device. Emmeline's expression was carefully neutral. I have recordings of multiple conversations between him and Miss Whitfield, discussing their plans, their timeline, their strategy for dealing with Mrs. Mercer after the divorce. Sloane's attorney leaned over, whispered urgently. Sloane shook her head, whispered back. Her hands were shaking now, visibly. We need a recess, the attorney said. Of course, Weisfam. Leonard gathered his papers, still smiling. Take all the time you need. In the hallway, Caroline found Emmeline standing by the window, looking out at the city spread below them. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had made a difficult choice and was trying to find peace with it. Why did you really do it? Caroline asked. You had a good a stable life. You could have stayed silent and no one would have known. Emmeline was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. My mother stayed silent once, she said finally. When my father was doing something wrong, she knew. She could have stopped it, but she chose security over integrity. She chose comfort over courage. She turned to face Caroline. It destroyed her eventually. Not the secret itself, but the knowledge that she could have done the right thing and chose not to. She spent the last years of her life drowning in guilt. Emmeline's voice was steady. I do not want to be her. I do not want to teach my daughter that silence is acceptable when you witness injustice. So this is about your daughter. Everything is about our daughters. Emmeline almost smiled. Everything we do, every choice we make. We are building the world they will inherit, teaching them what kind of people to be. Caroline thought about that, about the daughter growing inside her, about the kind of world she wanted to create for that child. Thank you, she said, for having the courage I did not have. You had courage, Emmeline shook her head. You just did not know it yet. It takes a special kind of strength to trust someone completely, to believe in love despite everything telling you not to. You were not weak, Mrs. Mercer. You were hopeful. There is a difference. The conference room door opened. Sloane's attorney emerged. My client is prepared to discuss terms. Leonard appeared beside Caroline. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were triumphant. What terms? Full cooperation, complete testimony against Garrett Mercer, documentation of all communications and financial arrangements. The attorney looked exhausted. In exchange, reduced charges, no prison time. Caroline considered the satisfaction of watching Sloane face the full consequences of her actions, the practical benefit of her testimony against Garrett. She made her choice. No deal. Her voice was firm. Not yet, not until she explained something to me. She walked back into the conference room. Sloane looked up. Her makeup was smeared. Her composure was gone. Caroline sat down across from her. Why me, Sai? She asked simply. Of all the wealthy women in New York, all the trust fund daughters you could have targeted, why me specifically? Sloane was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was raw. Because of your mother. My mother died 8 years ago. She ruined my father's life. He never recovered from her rejection. Never stopped talking about her. The woman who chose someone else. The woman who proved he was not good enough. Sloane's eyes were bright with tears or fury. When Garrett mentioned he had met Harrison Ashford's daughter, it felt like fate, like a chance to finally even the score. So this was never really about money. The money was nice. Sloane laughed bitterly. But watching you suffer, watching an Ashford woman feel what my father felt for 30 years, that was priceless. Caroline sat back, let the words sink in. Generational hatred, inherited bitterness, a war she had never known she was fighting. Your father chose to let rejection define him, she said finally. He could have built a different life, found different happiness. Instead, he drank himself to death and raised you to hate people who never even knew you existed. Do not talk about my father. I feel sorry for you, Sloane. And she meant it. Not because of what is going to happen to you now, but because you never had a chance. You were raised on poison. Taught to see revenge as justice. You never learned there was another way to live. She stood. Full cooperation. Complete testimony. You accept the charges as filed, and I will recommend leniency in sentencing." Carolyn walked toward the door. "Take the deal, Sloan. Learn from this. Break the cycle your father started." She left without waiting for an answer. 3 weeks had passed since the deposition. The legal machinery ground forward with its own momentum now. Criminal charges filed, civil suits initiated, settlement negotiations ongoing. Caroline's days were filled with meetings and documents and the endless minutiae of dismantling a marriage that had never really existed. But today was different. Today she was doing something for herself. She stood in the doorway of a brownstone in Brooklyn. 3 stories. Red brick worn soft by a century of weather. A small garden in front where roses could be planted come spring. A wrought iron fence that had probably seen both world wars. Her brownstone, purchased with her own money from her own accounts through her own decisions. The first major choice she had made entirely alone. The real estate agent had been skeptical. A woman 7 months pregnant, going through a divorce, wanting to buy a brownstone in Brooklyn. It had taken some convincing. But the deed was in her name. The keys were in her hand. The future was hers to build. She had found the property herself, toured it herself, negotiated the price herself. When her father had offered to help, she had politely declined. "I need to do this alone," she had explained. "I need to prove to myself that I can." He had understood. He always did. Now she walked through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The walls needed painting. The kitchen needed updating. The third-floor bathroom had a leak that would require professional attention. But the bones were good. The structure was sound. And when she stood by the window in what would become the nursery, she could see all the way to the Manhattan skyline across the river. Her daughter kicked. "I know," Carolyn murmured. "It needs work, but it is ours." The doorbell rang. Margot stood on the stoop, arms full of takeout containers. Behind her, Teddy carried a toolkit and a folding table. And behind him, 3 more of their college friends who had rallied to help. Charlotte, the interior designer who had volunteered to consult on the renovation. Marcus, the contractor who was donating his weekend labor. And Priya, who had simply shown up with champagne and the declaration that someone needed to supervise. "Housewarming committee reporting for duty," Margot announced. They spread out through the house. Charlotte made notes about paint colors and furniture placement. Marcus examined the plumbing and declared the leak fixable. Priya found a radio somewhere and filled the empty rooms with music. Teddy assembled what furniture had already arrived. A simple dining table, a set of chairs, the crib that had belonged to their grandmother, carefully restored and delivered that morning. They worked through the afternoon, eating Thai food from containers, arguing about the best color for the nursery, laughing at jokes that were not particularly funny but felt hilarious in the moment. Carolyn found herself standing in the kitchen, watching her friends through the doorway. Margot was demonstrating some kind of dance move that Charlotte was trying to replicate. Teddy and Marcus were having a heated debate about power tools. Priya was taking photos of everything, documenting the before so there would be a record of the transformation. These people, these wonderful, imperfect, loyal people, they had dropped everything when she needed them, had rallied without being asked, had shown up with food and tools and love, expecting nothing in return. This was what family really meant, not the lies Garrett had told her, not the fantasy she had tried to build with him, but this, people who showed up, people who stayed. "You okay?" Margot appeared beside her, a container of pad thai in hand. "More than okay," Carolyn smiled. "Just grateful." "For what?" "For you, for all of this." She gestured at the chaos of renovation. "For people who love me enough to spend their Saturday assembling furniture and arguing about paint swatches." "Please, this is the most fun I have had in months." Margot bumped her shoulder gently. "Watching you discover who you really are? Best show in town." "Who I really am? The woman who stands up, who fights back, who buys brownstones in Brooklyn and builds her own future." Margot's eyes were bright. "That woman was always in there, Carrie. She just got lost for a while." Carolyn thought about that as the afternoon faded into evening. The woman she had been before Garrett. The woman she had become during her marriage. The woman she was becoming now. Were they different people? Or different versions of the same person? Later, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Caroline sat alone in what would become her living room. A single lamp cast warm light across the empty space. The baby was finally still, perhaps lulled by the day's activity. She pulled out her mother's journal, the one she had been reading every night since the divorce filing. Learning about the woman Eleanor had been before she became a wife, a mother, a society pillar. She turned to an entry she had bookmarked. September 3rd, 1995. Carolyn started school today, first grade. She was so nervous she would not eat breakfast. But when I dropped her off, she squared her shoulders and walked into that building like she owned it. So brave, so determined. Oh, I wonder sometimes who she will become, what choices she will make, what person will emerge from this fierce, stubborn, beautiful child. Whoever she becomes, I hope she knows that she is enough, that she does not need anyone else to complete her, that her worth is not measured by the people who love her, but by the person she chooses to be. Carolyn closed the journal and wiped her eyes. Her mother had seen something in her even then, a strength that Caroline herself had forgotten existed, a capability that had been buried under years of trying to be what others wanted. She was finding it again now, piece by piece, day by day. I am enough, she whispered to the empty room. I was always enough. The baby kicked in agreement. Her daughter was born at 3:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in December. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, brown eyes that seemed to see everything. A full head of dark hair that stuck up in all directions no matter how carefully the nurses tried to smooth it. Caroline had been in labor for 14 hours, had breathed through contractions that felt like being torn apart, had pushed until she thought she had nothing left to give. And then, suddenly, miraculously, a cry. Her daughter's first breath, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. They placed the baby on her chest, skin to skin, heart to heart. Carolyn looked down at this tiny person who had been growing inside her for 9 months. This stranger she already loved more than she had thought possible. Hi, she whispered, I have been waiting for you. The baby opened her eyes, looked up at her mother, made a small sound that might have been recognition. I am going to make mistakes, Carolyn continued. Tears were streaming down her face, but she did not care. A lot of them, probably. Every day, probably. But I promise you this, I will always tell you the truth. About everything. About your father, about me. About how complicated and messy and beautiful life can be. The baby yawned. And I will make sure you know always, every single day, that your worth is not measured by the people who want you. Not by their approval or their love or their absence. You are enough, just as you are. You were enough the moment you existed. You will always be enough. She named her Eleanor. After the grandmother she would never meet. After the woman who had faced doubt and chosen love. After the legacy of strength that flowed through generations of Ashford women. The hospital room filled with visitors over the following hours. Margot arrived first, of course, crying before she even made it through the door. She took 300 photos and declared that baby Eleanor was objectively the most beautiful infant in human history, and she would fight anyone who disagreed. Teddy came next. He held his niece like she was made of the most fragile glass imaginable, stared at her tiny fingers and her tiny toes and her tiny nose with an expression of pure wonder. She is so small, he kept saying. How is she so small? She will grow, Carolyn promised. Charlotte and Marcus and Priya arrived together. They brought flowers and balloons and a onesie that said future boss in sparkly letters. They took turns holding the baby and making ridiculous faces to try to make her smile. Harrison came last. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking slightly. She looks like her grandmother, he said finally. I know. Caroline smiled. Come meet her. He crossed to the bed, took his granddaughter in his arms with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man who had spent 50 years being ruthless in boardrooms. Hello, Eleanor, he said softly. I am your grandfather. I am going to spoil you absolutely rotten. I am going to buy you a pony and let you eat ice cream for dinner and never, ever tell you no. He looked up at Caroline. I am going to do all the things I was too busy to do with my own daughter. Dad, I missed so much. His voice was rough with emotion. When you were small, when you needed me, I was always working, always building, always chasing the next deal. You were providing for us. I was hiding from the hard parts. He shook his head. Your mother knew. She never blamed me, but she knew. The journals, the letters to Charles, all of it came from loneliness I created. Dad, you cannot blame yourself. I can, and I do, but I can also do better now. He looked down at Eleanor, who had grabbed his finger and was holding on with surprising strength. I will not miss this one's childhood. I will be here, present, available, for both of you. Carolyn reached out, took her father's hand. We are going to be okay, she said. All three of us. We are going to be okay. 3 months later, Carolyn stood in the doorway of her Brooklyn brownstone with Eleanor in her arms. The renovation was complete. The walls were painted soft cream and sage green, and the palest pink in the nursery. The kitchen had been updated with modern appliances while keeping the original cabinets. The leak in the third-floor bathroom was fixed. It was a home now. Their home. Margot had helped choose the furniture. Teddy had hung all the art. Charlotte had sourced vintage pieces that gave each room character. Marcus had installed built-in bookshelves in what Caroline called the library, even though it was really just a small room off the living room. Her mother's journals filled one shelf. Her own books filled another. And a collection of children's books, already growing, waited for the day when Eleanor would be old enough to enjoy them. First day in our new home, Caroline said to her daughter. What do you think? Eleanor gurgled. It might have been approval. Caroline carried her through each room, showing her the nursery where she would sleep, the kitchen where they would cook together someday, the garden bare now in winter but waiting for spring, and the roses Caroline planned to plant. Her mother's roses, different cuttings from the same plants that grew at the Ashford estate, a living connection to the grandmother Eleanor would never know. This is where we live now, Caroline said. Just you and me, and anyone we choose to let in. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find a delivery person holding an enormous arrangement of flowers, pink and white, with a silver balloon shaped like a star. The card read, Welcome home, both of you. Love always, Dad. Caroline smiled, brought the flowers inside, set them on the kitchen table that had been her grandmother's, brought over from storage. 3 generations of Ashford women represented in one small kitchen. Margaret's table, Eleanor's roses, waiting to be planted, and baby Eleanor, newest link in the chain. Some things Caroline was learning were stronger than they appeared. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Ashford Foundation headquarters gleamed under the light of 1,000 candles. 200 people filled the seats arranged in elegant rows. Donors and activists and journalists and friends, all gathered to celebrate both an anniversary and a new beginning. Caroline stood backstage, adjusting her dress, navy blue, simple cut, elegant but not ostentatious. Her daughter's favorite color, though at 1 year old, Eleanor's color preferences changed daily depending on what toy was closest. You are going to be amazing. Margot appeared beside her, baby Eleanor on her hip. The toddler was dressed in a tiny version of her mother's dress, complete with sparkly shoes that she kept trying to remove. I am going to throw up, Caroline said. You are not. You are going to walk out there and tell your story and inspire every single person in that room. Margot bounced Eleanor gently. And then we are going to eat cake and drink champagne and celebrate how far you have come. How far I have come. Caroline shook her head. 1 year ago, I was standing in a different ballroom, watching my life fall apart. 1 year ago, your life started. Margot's voice was firm. Everything before that was just rehearsal. The music shifted. Caroline's cue. She took her daughter from Margot, settled Eleanor on her hip, and walked onto the stage. The applause started immediately, 200 people rising to their feet, clapping, cheering, some of them crying. Caroline made her way to the podium, adjusted the microphone with her free hand, looked out at the faces before her. Harrison sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside him was Mrs. Patterson, who had insisted on attending despite claiming she never went to fancy events. Teddy was there with his new girlfriend, a law student who was already arguing constitutional theory with Leonard Cross. Charlotte and Marcus and Priya were taking photos for Instagram. And in the back, standing quietly by the door, was Emmeline Drake. She had started her own consulting firm, just as she had planned. Caroline had been her first investor. Thank you all for being here tonight. Caroline's voice was steady, strong. the voice of a woman who had found herself in the wreckage of everything she thought she wanted. Eleanor grabbed for the microphone. The audience laughed. Carolyn gently redirected her daughter's attention to the sparkly shoes, which were suddenly fascinating again. 1 year ago, I stood in a different ballroom, wearing a different dress, surrounded by different people. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew what my life would be. I was wrong about almost everything. She paused. Let the words settle. My mother, Eleanor Ashford, started this foundation 30 years ago. She believed in second chances, in the capacity of people to change and grow and become better versions of themselves. She also believed in protection, in creating safety for those who needed it. Carolyn looked at her daughter, at this perfect, innocent person who had no idea what her mother had survived to bring her into the world. Tonight, I am proud to announce the expansion of the Eleanor Ashford Foundation. We are launching a new initiative, financial education and protection for women entering marriage. Applause rippled through the room. This program will provide legal consultations for women reviewing prenuptial and postnuptial agreements, financial literacy workshops for couples preparing to merge their lives, and most importantly, a confidential helpline for anyone who suspects they may be experiencing financial abuse in their relationship. She thought about all the signs she had missed, the documents she had signed without reading, the trust she had placed in someone who did not deserve it. I used to think my story was a tragedy, she continued, a fairy tale that turned into a horror movie. I spent months being angry, at myself for being deceived, at him for being the deceiver, at the world for letting it happen. Eleanor squirmed. Carolyn adjusted her grip. But I have learned something this past year. My story is not a tragedy. It is a transformation. A woman who thought she needed someone else to complete her discovering that she was complete all along. A woman who thought love meant losing herself, learning that real love means finding herself. She looked out at the audience, at all these people who had gathered to support her, to celebrate with her. There are no fairy tales, not really. There are just people doing their best, making mistakes, and hopefully learning from them. There are just choices made every day that determine who we become. Usi, she looked at her daughter. I am going to teach my daughter that she does not need a prince. She does not need a castle. She does not need anyone else's approval or permission or protection. She needs herself and a really good lawyer. Laughter mixed with applause. She also needs community, family, friends who will show up when everything falls apart, people who will assemble furniture and bring takeout and listen to her cry and never once suggest that her pain is too much trouble. Carolyn's eyes found Margot in the crowd, then Teddy, then her father. That is what real support looks like. Not one person who promises to complete you, but many people who help you complete yourself. Eleanor finally succeeded in removing one sparkly shoe. She held it up triumphantly. The audience laughed. I want to thank everyone who helped me this past year. My father, who knew when to fight and when to let me fight for myself. My friends, who never let me give up. And my daughter, who arrived in the middle of the hardest period of my life and somehow made everything make sense. She looked at Eleanor, this tiny person, this reason for everything. I am not the woman I was a year ago. I am not the woman I will be a year from now. But right now, in this moment, I know who I am. I am Caroline Ashford, mother, daughter, survivor, and I am just getting started. The applause was thunderous. 200 people on their feet, cheering, celebrating. Carolyn walked off stage with her daughter in her arms and her head held high. After the event, she walked through her mother's rose garden. It was spring now. The roses were starting to bloom, white climbing roses along the eastern wall, just like her mother had planted 30 years ago. The cuttings Carolyn had planted at the Brooklyn brownstone were taking root too. By summer, there would be roses in both places. Eleanor was drowsy in her arms, fighting sleep the way she always did. The party had been too exciting. Too many new faces. Too much stimulation. Carolyn sat on the bench where her mother used to sit with her morning tea. The same bench where she had sat 1 year ago, broken and terrified, wondering if she would survive. She had survived. More than survived. She had transformed. I did it, Mom, she whispered to the roses. to the stars, to whatever part of her mother might still be listening. I found my way back to myself. The roses swayed in the evening breeze. Eleanor sighed and finally surrendered to sleep. Somewhere in the city, Garrett Mercer was living in a small apartment, his fortune gone, his reputation ruined, his plans turned to ash. Sloane Whitfield was completing her community service hours, learning perhaps that cruelty had consequences. Carolyn did not think about them much anymore. They had taken up too much space in her mind for too long. She had reclaimed that space for better things, for her daughter, for her foundation, for the life she was building one choice at a time. She looked down at Eleanor, sleeping peacefully, unaware of everything that had happened before she was born, unaware of the pain and betrayal and the long journey to this moment. "I love you," Carolyn whispered, "more than I knew was possible, more than I can ever explain." The baby stirred slightly, smiled in her sleep. Carolyn thought about all the things she would tell her daughter someday, about her grandmother Eleanor, who faced doubt and chose love, about the foundation and its work helping women find their strength, about the night at the gala when everything fell apart and started to come together. She would tell her about the pain and the healing and the incredible strength that comes from surviving something you thought would destroy you. She would tell her that a trust, once broken, is slow to rebuild, that love, when real, is worth waiting for. That family is not just blood, but the people who show up when everything goes wrong. And she would tell her that fairy tales are lies, but real life can be better. Because real life has depth, complexity, heartbreak, and triumph, and everything in between. Real life has this moment, a mother and daughter, a garden in bloom, a future full of possibility. Real life is not a fairy tale. Real life is better. The stars came out one by one over the garden. The roses released their fragrance into the evening air. And Caroline Ashford sat with her daughter in her arms, finally at peace, finally home, finally free. She stood slowly, careful not to wake the baby, walked back toward the house where her father waited with a champagne and love and all the support she could ever need. Behind her, the roses nodded in the breeze, her mother's legacy, still growing, still blooming, still beautiful. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with something better. With a woman who had found herself, with a child who would be raised to know her worth, with a future written not in fairy tale promises but in real choices, made every day. Caroline Ashford walked into her new life with her daughter in her arms and her head held high, and she never looked back. And that is Caroline's story, a woman who lost everything and found herself in the wreckage. If this story touched your heart, if you felt her pain and cheered for her victory, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It only takes a second, but it helps this channel more than you know. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in Caroline's situation. I read every single one, and if you have not subscribed yet, join our family. We share stories like this every week. Stories of strength, stories of survival, stories of women who refuse to stay down. Until next time, stay strong and never let anyone dim your light.